Content on this production is for entertainment and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice, nor is it intended to substitute medical treatment or diagnosis. Seek medical help if you believe that you are suffering from a mental illness or are a threat to yourself or others. By using any or all of the information provided, you do so at your own risk. Any application of the material is at the listener's discretion and is his or her sole responsibility.
Hey everybody, this is Doc Bryan, and welcome to Doc Talks, where we talk about life's trials, tribulations, tests, and triumphs, and the success that we can have in life despite other problems that we may have. Today, we have a very special guest with us, Marina Franklin. Thank you for being with us, Marina.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm looking forward to our talk here, and this is the first podcast that I've done here by Zoom, so I appreciate you being willing to do it this way for us. And so, where are you? Do you live here in New York, or where do you reside?
Yes.
Okay, where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Chicago.
Okay, tell me just a little bit about your childhood growing up, the family dynamic, that sort of thing.
So I grew up in Highland Park, Illinois, till I was about 8 years old. My mom and my dad divorced when I was 8. So she moved to the south side of Chicago back into her parents' home. And then after she reestablished her own, I guess, money and her life, she moved to the south suburbs, which was the Park Forest, Richton Park, Homewood, Flossmoor. She moved a lot. So there's 3 areas within that south suburb that she moved to based on who she was dating, kind of like. So she dated my sister's father, and then she had my sister, Ashley, and then she moved with him, and then they broke up, and then she moved away from him back into her apartment, and now she lives in North Carolina with the man that she's been married to for the longest. And my dad, who is now passed, but my dad lived downtown Chicago during that time where she was moving, and he lived on Clark and Diversey, a very nice area. He was a businessman, and owned his own company, travel agency.
Okay, so early on, you were still able to see both parents then and have a relationship with both of them, or was there a bit of a disconnect there?
There was a disconnect at 8. My dad disappeared.
Okay.
He lost his company. That's why we moved from Highland Park. It's like where they take Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Okay.
It's one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in America. It's like where like Rumsfeld went to school at New Trier, So he lost his company and hid. We didn't see him for a long time. Then rediscovered him again when I was 13. When my mom was out in the suburbs initially before she met someone else. He tried to, come back into our lives. So he was there for a brief moment, and that didn't work out, I guess. I didn't really understand what was going on. And then he was gone again. He came back again when I was about probably a year later, but it was more like through my grandmother, where he would have us stay with my grandmother, and then he would visit us and take us out and do the work that he was supposed to do, really.
Right.
As a dad.
And so you had a younger half sister then? Did
So
I understand right?
Oh boy. Okay, so here we go. Now this is a fun time right here. I had a very fun dad, that's what I say. So I had one whole sister, she's passed since. I have an older half sister. So my dad has 4 kids, me, Naila, John, Leah, Ashley, 5 kids, including me. Leah is my oldest half sister by 6 months, which means we're like Irish twins, but not Irish. Like I said, I had a fun dad. I do the family tree by the mothers. Jermaine, my mom is Maria, and Shalita. My mother has me, Naila, and Ashley. And that was with her next marriage. And then Shalita, with my dad, had 2 kids. Another Ashley. Told you it was going to be fun. and John Ashton. So I have 2 sisters named Ashley, one for my dad, one for my mom.
Okay.
Whew.
So growing up, there wasn't a whole lot of stability, I guess would be a fair statement.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay.
I don't define it like that, but
Okay.
yeah, I get what you mean.
But like from being in the same place at one time,
Lot
stability.
of moving, lot
Okay.
of moving around.
Right.
Yeah.
So did you notice at some point in your childhood that this wasn't very comfortable and that you had to reacclimate to where you were going? Because I'm just assuming you had to change schools in moving. Was that difficult to try to get back into social circles?
That's why I'm a comic. Yeah. I mean, I call myself the chameleon. Actually, I just realized because I'm approaching 50 that part of what was that upbringing is why I tend to impersonate people. I tend to pick up people's rhythms, patterns, speech patterns. I sometimes even become people for a while. But when I left Highland Park, I was you could say white. And then when we moved to the south side of Chicago, I was confused because I wasn't black. So I had to be black and I tried to act black and that wasn't good. It was bad the way because it was like a white girl trying to be black. Then when we moved out to the south suburbs, that was the utopia of black and white relationships and equality as far as income. So I was just weird to everyone because I was trying to be black and they were like, just be you.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a lot of like adjusting and yeah, kids tend to bully you when you're new. I was always the new kid, but I always found a way to make people laugh. And so I always found a way to like make them like me. I had to make them like me where I was or else, yeah.
So in a sense, you used your comedic ability to gain friends and to gain trust in some area.
Sure. Yeah. I didn't know that at the time. I look back at it and I know that's what it was. And sometimes I was just funny and didn't know I was funny. I mean, part of it was like being just who I was. I think so. I've done therapy for years. So my therapist would say most people wouldn't handle situations the way you did, but I just tended to adjust. Even in Highland Park, which was, it was predominantly a white neighborhood, racism was going on. It was the 70s. I had to, at times, not all the time, because my school, they were used to me. There wasn't a lot of racism there. But when I was in new situations like camp and stuff like that, there was a lot. So I used to make the camp counselor laugh
Mm.
and make her my friend. So I found a way.
So you always found a strong person to try to be your attachment to help you through?
No, I don't think that's exactly, I didn't find a strong person in each situation. In camp, it was just the person that liked me. I wouldn't say she was necessarily a strong person. I would just say she was into my comedy.
Okay.
Yeah, because I wouldn't describe everyone in those situations were not, it wasn't like there was a strong person here. Sometimes it was just like whoever was into me, whoever got it.
So you made sure to attach to the person who could see you for who you were,
Yes.
or the ones that
Or
found you funny
yeah.
and appreciated that side of you.
Yeah.
So you said you
Yes.
do impressions. What would, in your opinion, who is your best impression that you can do?
Oh, my best impression. It depends on who I'm around at the time. I do my ex-boyfriend Keith Robinson, who's a comedian, a lot because he always says things like he's inside my head a lot. So I oftentimes impersonate him going, Marina needs to shut her trap. Or, he'll say something like, shut it. He goes, that absolutely stinks. But it just depends on who. Like I used to impersonate Bill Burr a lot because Bill Burr and I used to get into fights all the time. So Bill Burr would always say, Jesus Christ, you know what? Marina, did you have to go there? In high school, I used to impersonate my friends. I had 2 black friends that also spoke their type of white girls. There's different types. So I had one that her name was Celia, and she would like be like, let's just like have a good time. Like, It's not even like serious. Like, whatever. Like, I don't know why you're hanging out with those girls when you can hang out with like me. So I used to do her all the time. And I ran into her 25 years later. And it happened to be on the same weekend that I had just finished impersonating her to my other friends. And they told her, which I was like, no, don't tell her. And they were like, they told her, she goes, oh, yeah, she used to impersonate me all the time.
Well, did impersonating people, did that kind of help you to kind of put yourself in a role that they played? Was it a coping mechanism, or was it something that you just were able to do and enjoyed doing?
I think both,
Hmm.
actually. A lot of times you're in situations where if you want people to like you, if you're like them, then they will, right?
Right.
So that's coping. Cause I would say, like on the south side of Chicago, I used to impersonate my uncle. So I was doing I thought like doing the pimp walk. I don't know why I thought that was being more black, but I used to do like this little like pimp walk. And I don't even know why they called it a pimp walk. That's horrible now that I think about it. But it's like, in Stir Crazy when Richard Pryor, and they're like, yeah, I'm bad. Yeah, that's right. Like I looked kind of like that. And my Uncle John used to always correct my proper English and make it slang because I was so proper speaking. I used to say you all instead of y'all. It was very proper. I'm no longer like that. But so he would say, it's not you all, it's y'all. It's not are not, it's ain't. So, or I. It's not all right, it's I. So I used to always say, I to this day, I go, I. That was just coping. And then I also enjoyed it.
Right. In this trying to, would you say that you were trying to fit in, or you were trying to gain friends?
I don't know if I was trying to gain friends as much as I was trying to just be like, have peace of mind.
Hmm.
Cause I was never seeking friends. Like I never do that, but I was always like, just wanted people to leave me alone
Mm.
and be okay. I
So,
tend to be an entertainer though, so I liked an audience.
so it wasn't necessarily about having friends, but the ability to feel like you belonged in a group of people.
Or just like, see, to belong means you want to belong. I didn't want to, I wanted just people to leave me alone.
Okay. Okay.
So that's not really like belonging. I don't know if I wanted to like belong. I just wanted either you came or you didn't, but I definitely wanted people to not hit me.
Right. So, what was the first time that you really realized that you were funny?
Yeah, I didn't realize it. I mean, when I look back, I remember that camp counselor laughing so hard and enjoying it. Once she laughed, it was a rhythm. I could make her laugh harder if I keep going with the joke. And I remember doing that as a kid. I remember her falling on the grass, holding her stomach and laughing so hard and enjoying that. And I was probably 8 years old.
Okay, did that give you a sense of enjoyment, or did it give you a sense of peace and comfort?
That was enjoyment.
Enjoyment. Okay, good. So now progressing on, into high school, or I don't know if you went to college or not in a collegiate area. Tell me a little bit about life in that part of your experience, and how it was to grow up in an America where there was a lot of tension within race, and how did that affect you're already, having to move around and try to find, new people, or trying to feel like, I don't want to use the word belong, but to feel like you were there in the moment. How did that affect you?
I didn't, I never looked at like I was never angry at white people and I would say I probably hung out with them more that but when I went to college only because they seemed to accept me a little bit more. They were nicer about it, the ones that did like me. I never had like a core group of black friends and I did try to find that in high school or no, they found me. That's how it happened. That's what happened. They were like, "We like her." And then I was like, "Oh, good. I've never had a core group of black girlfriends." And then so when I went to college, I went to University of Illinois. For the first time ever, I was actually segregated into a dorm floor that was all black. And at the time, I didn't think about it. I just realized it lately. But I realized it was the first time that I had a core group of Black girlfriends. And it was new for me in a sense that there was a difference. Like there was a cultural difference in friendship. And I was just learning. And so I would try to, my speech was different. I was talking like them. And then I had a friend who is my best friend to this day. Her name happens to be Isis, my best friend, not a religion. But my
I
best
know a girl named Isis. So yeah,
Oh, good.
she's just a wonderful person and very funny and a lot of fun to be around.
So my best friend Isis saw me at what was called Soul Food Night in college. And she said, Marina doesn't talk like that. She was just now meeting me and she called me out in front of my girlfriends. She said, Marina is trying to talk Black and she doesn't talk like that. And it exposed me. I was so upset. That was probably the way it affected me. And I think actually also I wasn't great at the friendship with those girls, my new Black girlfriends in college. There was something that happened where we fought and then I had to leave the floor. I just was like, I can't do this. And I wasn't sure at that time what that meant. I didn't know exactly. And then I remember my boyfriend at the time, he's like, you're not used to hanging out with girls like that. I don't know if it was those specific girls, if it was because I wasn't used to having culturally a group of Black friends that I met that were new, because in high school, my girlfriends that were Black that adopted me, they found me. We're still friends to this day. They accepted me for who I was. These girls were new to me. And I was trying to be like them in a way, and that didn't work out. That had its effect, but like racially, like overall, I would say I wasn't like, I'm just going to hang out with these people, or I just was okay. I was okay with things. I came out okay. I mean, some people who come from my experience they probably either would not like white people, or I don't know. Actually, I would worry about those people. I did okay. I did all right.
So if I understand correctly, it was when someone befriended you, that was a friendship that lasted and was nurturing. But when you would reach into a group of friends, that was where it was dysfunction or it just didn't work out.
Yeah, and I didn't reach it. It was mostly like they put me at U of I. They put me on that dorm floor. They forced us into a cultural situation. They segregated us. And my roommate was one of the Black girls from high school that talked white. And she talked more like, oh my God, hey, hi, Marina, it's okay. So we were friends, always friends. So, but she accepted me.
I wish that our listeners would be able to see your facial expressions and jovialness that you have going on there. It is I would say it's entertaining, but it also is authentic. I feel the personality coming out in that era. With people sometimes that are good at impersonating, sometimes when they were younger, they really struggled with identity and who they were and where they were to fit in. Did you have any struggles like that?
Well, when I was on the south side of Chicago at that one school, yeah, that was hard. That was difficult because I just didn't know. I was young. I was 9 years old. And for the first time, I was like, I'm so happy to be around people that look like me. That's all I knew. I had always been around, white kids. And I would say when I was in Highland Park, there was that point where you just worry about, is this nose okay? All these things. And then I had a mother who would always install in me that these things don't matter. And then when I went to the south side of Chicago, and I was just really confused because I was like, oh, finally, I get Black people who look like me. I could play. And they were like, you sound funny. That's what I would get. You sound funny and you don't know how to jump double Dutch. I was like, I got to learn double Dutch. So I trained on my block. It was a mission. I was like Rocky. I was like, I'm going to get this double Dutch down. I don't care what happens. And I did.
I was about to say, and I assumed that you did.
Oh, yeah. They told me, they said, start wide. This is going to sound. They said, you're going to start wide-legged. And then your legs are going to close up and you're going to be jumping fine. I was like, all right. So I trained on my block because on my block, the kids there accepted me. They were just like, they knew my grandfather, they knew my whole family. So everyone was like, that's, Mr. Merrill's granddaughter. And they didn't even say things like you sound funny or anything like that. But I was like, I need to learn double dutch. You guys got to help me so I could go to school. Because when I would turn, they would always say, she turns funny. She's not turning, she's double handed. And I was like, double, what does that mean? And that means when the rhythm of the double dutch sounds like, it's supposed to sound, but it sound like, so that means no one can jump. So I couldn't play.
I'm glad that you explained that because I had no idea what that meant. So in UI, what was your major?
Psychology.
Psychology. I'm sorry.
Well, I wanted to major in theater.
Mhm.
But my dad would not let me because he said, well, it was also like there wasn't really a strong theater program at U of I. My dad was like, you're going to go to U of I, you need to get a really strong education. Can't be in theater. So I chose psychology, which was that felt like a close second.
So what was your end goal there with that degree?
I have no clue. I don't know. I'll tell you what, it was only to be in school because that's what they said I needed to do. And I felt like if you didn't go to school, you weren't going to make money eventually. So I was like, if I go to college and I get a degree, at least when you go and apply for a job, they can see you have an education. That's what I was taught. That's what I was told. That's what I thought. But then what happened was I still did theater. I still did, when I was at University of Illinois, I performed at during Black History Month. Everyone knew me as the girl who did these great monologues for Black History Month. It would be like 1,200 people in the audience. My dad came to see one of the shows. I did this performance called, The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. I am an invisible man. No, I am not a spook like those who haunted Edgar. I was doing angry Black pieces, but I wasn't that angry. I'm so good. I just wanted them. They liked me and they had no idea I wasn't really that angry. And then I graduated. And at that point, my dad let it go. I went to Syracuse to get my master's in fine arts based on the teacher that I had at University of Illinois. She referred me to Syracuse and Christine Hunter. She was the best acting teacher ever. I still talk to her to this day. And she told me, great to go there.
So you then did get to go and pursue a career of training in acting.
Yeah, I sure did.
I do think that it's important to point out, and I have mentioned this on other podcasts, not everybody is fit for college. College isn't meant for everybody. And I think that while we should have aspirations and dreams and goals, that there are things that we should be just as proud of, such as trade school or starting our own business as an entrepreneur and making it ourselves without having to have a piece of paper that makes us feel validated in some kind of way. It seems like high schools train kids to go to college and not how to live in the real world.
Oh, amen, brother.
I think it's important for us to notate that. However, going into acting with just the few people that I know, they would tell me it is imperative to have a good acting teacher or a theater teacher that really shows you what to do, because I think a lot of people take for granted exactly the art of acting.
I agree. I mean, I really studied. I mean, Syracuse had at the time that I was there. I have a hard time thinking of years. You can analyze that if you want, but I was at Syracuse in 93. Jeez. And so to 96. Yeah. And so at that time, all of the main actors from New York City on Broadway were going to Syracuse. That's why I went there, because the teacher who I met at U of I said, you will get the best training and you'll also be around the best actors. And the artistic director there is incredible. You should be there while he's there. And it was true. Now, the master's program at Syracuse was a defunct program. It no longer exists because I think it was just like a money grab for them. I don't know what they were doing, but it didn't matter. The thing is the class structure is Arthur Storch Theater, Arthur Storch originated from method acting, the actor's studio, and he was still alive when I was there. And I would watch him work in the actor's studio, work with students. And there's a real technique to this. And I actually taught theater too. They had, you get like you get your intro to acting where they give a class so you can, support your pay for your student loans and all that and pay for class. So I taught intro to acting and I had like every year I had like this number of students each semester.
So, what in your life up to this point in college would you say was the thing that affected you negatively the most, or was the most traumatic up to this point in your life?
Well, one thing I probably won't discuss here
Okay,
because I just won't do it.
sure,
But
sure.
my sister, I'll say it, but I won't go into it because it's it's big trauma. But I will say my sister was murdered, my sister Naila, and that happened when had moved to New York after college, way after. So that was probably the most traumatic experience I had. Also, I think I think that pretty much sums it up. So,
Yes.
and then now I had breast cancer last. We could talk about the breast cancer.
I'm so sorry.
No, I'm fine though. I'm good. I don't mean to laugh about it. It's just I am a comic,
Well,
but I talk about it on stage, and so yeah. But I would say my sister's death was more tragic and traumatic.
I I I can't even imagine. And I would say this not selfishly, but I hope I never would have to imagine or be in that circumstance. As far as with breast cancer, there it seems like there are more people now that are dealing with certain types of cancers and more women that are dealing with breast cancer than ever before. How did you stay strong during that treatment process?
Well, I didn't have chemo, so that made it a little easier. And I think what made it strong was connecting with other women and talking to other women, not other doctors. But learning how to listen to the doctors came from my communication with other women. I have 9 friends with breast cancer, and that shouldn't be. And like you said, it's an epidemic. So and they're younger and younger. It's like sometimes I see young girls look at me and they look at me as if, "Oh, you're older, that's why you have breast cancer." And the thing is that's not true anymore. It's the cases are like in their early 30s now. So I try to talk about it on stage so that I don't mean to scare people, but I think people need to be realistic about, their health and taking care of themselves. But that was the best thing that came out of having breast cancer was the friends that I gained and the friends that earned their wings. As one of my friends put it, you have friends that'll lose their wings when you go through a traumatic experience because, as I say, tragedy reveals character, and there are people who will gain wings. And so some of the strangers in my life were some of the best people, the kindness of strangers. And those are the ones who became my friends, but the kindness of them became is just a beautiful thing.
And I would like to say that I really appreciate your perspective. Yes, you did have this that happened to you, but even in bad things, we can find the positive and go through it as positive as we possibly can. And particularly in cancer or even other diseases, we do see that people who remain positive have better outcomes.
That's what I was told every single step of the way. I did a stand up for cancer on a plane. I did stand up on a plane. That probably was the only tragedy of that, but because it's really hard to perform for audience on a plane. You only get like the first 2 rows really that can hear you, and hopefully they're not in the aisle seat, but or the window seat. That was what I was told by a couple of the cancer survivors on the plane. It's so important to remain positive. I had one of the girls look at me and she said, it doesn't matter. All my patients, the moment they lost faith or they got depressed, it's like that's when things took a turn for the worst. So I kept that in mind. What's fascinating is I did talk to a woman. I did a cancer benefit, and I said that to a woman, and she said, no, but it's okay to feel and cry. And I could sense that she didn't understand that those things can happen simultaneously. You can be positive and be sad at the same time. You can cry, you can feel everything and still have a positive attitude. Once you sink yourself into the sadness, it turns into depression, which is something I've never been.
Yeah, I find myself a lot telling clients that however you feel, it's okay to feel that way, but don't unpack and live there. And it is important for us to cry. It is important for us to feel sad. It is important for us to feel happy. It is important for us to feel positive. But in those emotions that are negatively based, because you can cry when you're happy too. It's not just exclusively bad. That we don't stay there. I also think I have a close friend who had breast cancer. It was quite comprehensive, and she ended up having to have cosmetic surgery and that sort of thing. But I could never get her to understand that she wasn't a victim, that while, yes, she did have this, while she was going through it, she had it, but she is now a survivor. And she let cancer define who she was. And we can't do that. We have to realize we are survivors, and we use this experience to help other people who are suffering. But I think that, not even in cancer, that we have people who live as a victim, and they don't get any better because they don't move from the victim mentality into, I survived this. I got through this. Some people say, well, how am I going to get over this? Or how am I going to get around this? Well, that's not how it works. You get through it.
Right.
We move through it together.
That's right.
And the importance of the word together, that you're never alone. As lonely as you may feel, you're never alone if you would seek somebody to be there with you. But I think we kind of get into that mentality of being a victim and being all alone, and we just, for lack of a better word, we feel comfortable there, and we don't reach out and we don't look for help. But I think we would also be remiss at this point in time during the podcast to mention how important it is to be examined and get checkups regularly, to have mammograms, to have pap smears, to have all of these things that are required in order for us to stay healthy and us to be on the front side of these issues.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just having advocates, go into the hospital with you. You see it more now because I think women are starting to understand you don't have to do this alone. If you take someone with you, they may listen much more than you do. When you're sitting in that room, you're in a state of shock in a sense. And so you may not be listening in the right way. And I found that out. I had a friend tell me, just record the doctors when they're talking to you if I'm not here so that you can listen back. And, I always ask for permission to record, of course. You don't want to just, record
Right.
people without their knowledge. But the thing is I would find after I left that office visit, a lot of times I would ask questions they had already answered. So I was not listening. So it was important to keep recording because when I listened, I also found out information that helped me make the decisions about my treatment because you do have control over how you need to be treated and especially for Black women, because that's an epidemic. Black women, how they feel and how they're treated. It's like people don't believe they're paying for some reason. And I never really understood that was a real thing until I went through this process. And so like arming myself with the information is it's the only power that I have. It was the only way that I could get through this in a good way. I mean, had I not, I may have done chemo.
I have a friend in Baton Rouge who is hematologist, oncologist, who specializes in metastatic cancer. And he has told me quite often that yes, it it is the attitude a lot of times, but that the patient needs to be constantly reminded that they're the one that has the decision about the treatment. And a lot of times, especially when it gets into a point of thinking about quality of life, that family members try to override the patient's wishes. In your instance, from what I understand, was not that severity. But did you ever encounter someone during your time that experienced that?
Well, I did. They actually helped me make my decision. So I have there was my friend Ginny, who's my advocate, but I also have my friend Lois, my Irish friend Lois, who would go with me. And she goes, Marina, she goes, no, you can't have this doctor. She just graduated from college. Ask her history. She may be good someday, but you can't work with her. Not now. No, run. So I know that was not the great Irish accent, but I try. My face looks really funny when I do her to get it right. But she refuses to take tamoxifen. Tamoxifen is a treatment, hormonal treatment that they give women who are perimenopausal and or pre. They're not going through menopause yet. And they usually give it to women after they've gone through radiation and chemotherapy, or if they just do radiation like I did, then they give them tamoxifen for treatment. She was just adamant about that pill, tamoxifen, drove her insane. And she had to really tell the doctors, this is not what I want to take. I will not take. She switched off to another doctor. The doctor's still trying to get her to take it. She's like, she went to England to talk to this top woman who says, tamoxifen will damage your body. So I listened to her and she told me, your only power is to be informed. Read these books. And so that's what I would do. And then I also had another friend who took tamoxifen who had the same reaction. One of the things I did though is I listened very carefully to both women and I noticed something. I did my own little survey and little study. Both women were in treatment were in AA and dealt with depression. And tamoxifen, typically they offer an antidepressant when you take tamoxifen. So I then understood these particular women, this is why they responded to it the way they did. I mean, that was just my own just common sense. It just made sense to me. So I still need to read more about that. But for me, I decided not to take it as well because I listened to their stories. I know I'm a performer. I care about quality of life. I'm a pretty positive person. I don't get depressed. So I talked to my oncologist and I said to him, I really don't want to take this. I made sure that I knew what my Oncotype score is, which a lot of women don't know about. Oncotype scores for certain women's cancers, specifically mine, which is HER2 negative, estrogen, progesterone positive. There's an Oncotype test you can take that can tell you whether to take chemo or not take chemo and just do radiation. So usually when you get radiation, they ask you to then do the hormonal medicine, the tamoxifen. My Oncotype score was pretty low. It was like a 9. And maybe lower than that. So I made a decision and I told my doctor, I'm not taking this drug. I talked to my uncle, who is also a doctor, and I asked him about that drug. And I said, if I don't take this, what will happen? And he explained to me, some women don't respond to it. The dose they give women, it's very high. You could take it every other day. You could take it once a week. I just made a decision. I'm not taking it. I talked to my doctor about it. He listened to me and he said, okay, there is a study out with a woman who did not take it for 2 years. She was fine. Then she took it. I said, so then you shouldn't have told me that because for 2 years I ain't taking that drug, right? So now what he did was he suggested and referred me to an herbalist that he says, hands down, we don't understand it, but he has a high success rate. He has shrunk women's tumors. I met him in Queens, a little Asian guy in a diner, with bagels. And he tells me, you don't have to take that drug if you don't want to. He says, I will help you, but you have to be very, clear on if you're not taking that drug, you have to do the work. So those are the type of things, that arm you that help you make smart decisions based on your diagnosis.
Absolutely.
I
So,
hope that wasn't boring or too
oh,
technical.
no, is great. Are you currently seeing a therapist or in therapy for anything?
I was in therapy for years, especially after my sister passed. I stopped going because there's just no, we were out of subjects, I think. But really, I made the decision. She was fine with it. I still talk to her every now and then. I call her up. I don't have anything I can't handle right now. That's when I knew. I said, with my sister's death, I knew I needed help. So when I know I need help, I go and get it. My therapist was very good. I used to go out to Brooklyn. I live in Harlem. I would travel like an hour out every Wednesday. I was, as she put it, I would schlep out there every Wednesday and go and see her. And she was the best. Yeah, I don't really feel like I need that now.
So you were, I can only assume with depression from the loss of your sister would be the main thing that you were dealing with in those sessions.
Well, I wasn't depressed, and that's where she made it clear. I was sad, and she wanted to say what you just said. She wanted to make sure I didn't hang in that pocket of sadness so that it turned into depression because I was still even during that time, I would come back to New York and people were like, Marina seems okay. And I was like, well, that's because I'm in therapy, and I know how to take care of myself. My first therapist wasn't that great. Her name was Shirley. And she taught me how to take care of myself. I said, Shirley, you taught me how to take care of myself. So guess what, Shirley? I got to say goodbye to you. And she said, that's fair. But my second therapist, amazing. Had her for years. I think I stopped maybe like 2 years ago. 'Cause I just, nothing else. I got to live my life now.
Gotcha.
She gave me the tools.
Absolutely. And that's the most important thing is that we have not just the tools, but the access to the tools to help us through. All right. Thank you for listening to Doc Talks today. I'm Doc Brian. As we go into the diagnosis part of this, you can find that episode on Patreon where we talk about the diagnosis that we actually think has been going on with our guest and discuss that diagnosis and potential treatment of how we would bring this all together to help cope with their mental illness. Maria, I appreciate you sharing your story with us, and you'll join us with the second part of this podcast to discuss these things. Maria, where can we find you at?
Well, it's Marina.
I'm sorry.
That's
I'm
okay.
sorry.
It's my mother's name, so it's okay. You're saying her name, and she feels good about that.
Okay. Marina.
Think a place where you dock boats.
Yes, Marina.
So you can find me. I'm on all social media, but just go to my website, marinafranklin.com.
All right. And you can find me at thedocbrian.com on TikTok, _Brian, Instagram, thedocbrian. And there's a link at the bottom of my website as well for all of that social media. Feel free to follow us, both of us, and thank you for listening to us. And hopefully you will tune in next time and make sure to check out the second part of this episode of Doc Talks DX on Patreon. Doc Talks, of course, is a part of the Be Frank Network. And again, we thank you for listening. And again, thank you, Marina, for your help and being willing to talk with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody.